Let's let's see.
Like tiny little
Oh, there
circle.
we are.
Hey, what's
There
up?
we go. First try.
How you doing?
Doing pretty good. How are you guys?
Good. I was just checking my emails. Like, shit, did I email him back?
I think that looks a little better. It's like super dark here today because it's been pouring down rain all day. So trying to figure out the lighting situation.
Like,
It rained here this morning, so we got a little bit of sunshine right now.
it rains here every
Every
day,
day.
though. That's just Florida. And then it's hot.
That's true. We definitely don't rain as much as you guys, but you guys seem to get shorter stints of rain.
Yeah.
It'll like rain
Every
stop,
single
rain
day.
stop, rain stop.
Yeah, every single day, just enough to keep it nice and humid.
Yes, exactly. Cool. So how are you guys today? Doing pretty good?
Pretty good. Yeah, we actually took the entire weekend off from work, which is the first time we've done that in like 7 months. So today we were working, but it was very nice to not just feel like I was on that like continuous, I haven't had a day off in months.
Did you feel like you had more to do today than usual? Or
No,
not too bad?
yeah, I just basically gave up on social media for a couple of days. Like I just committed to not posting for a few days. That was taking off from work.
It wasn't taking off from our clients, it was
Yeah.
taking off from the content.
Yeah.
Got you. Yeah. Yeah, the content thing, man, that's a freaking energy sucker.
It's so much harder than people realize. Like I don't think people realize how much time and effort comes into like making as much content as we make, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't disagree with you there. So, okay. Looks like we're getting some people jumping in. So, for those of you joining us today, we are going to be talking about prerequisites for hormone intervention. So, any type of hormone type protocols. And I thought about this a little bit more too. So, I think this actually encompasses a lot of categories because it's kind of the typical stuff like the trying to get your cycle back, the typical low progesterone cases, that we're getting. That's like 95% of people that are coming in, but it also would lump in other cases, estrogen dominance, coming off birth control would definitely be a consideration here. Even one that another one would even be like considerations for when you might want to think about hormone replacement and when that might be a valid concern versus doing something the natural route. So there's kind of some big points we can hit on there. But the first and most obvious one that we all struggle with is client comes in and they know that there's issues. They've maybe done some previous labs. I think we're getting this more now that people are getting a little more aware of functional health. It's like because it used to be before where people just didn't know, so they came in and we had to be the bad guys because we had to be like, yo, guess what? You want to lose weight, but hey,
Yeah.
right? Which we still get a lot of those, definitely, but we are getting more of the people that already know that there is some type of dysfunction when they're coming to us, right? So what are some of and this is how we can kind of start this, what are some of the like really baseline initial checklist that you guys are going to be looking at when intaking somebody like that, or maybe like conversation that you're going to have with them?
Yeah. So I think it's so good that people are more aware these days. I love that there's content out there like that, but I do think a lot of times it kind of has people like bypassing the more basic foundational pieces and then just jumping straight to like, oh my gosh, my hormones are imbalanced. What supplements do I need to take? What protocols do I need to go on? And I work with a lot of the like over-exercised, underfed type of people, but it's kind of, like the high stress people, but you see the same exact issues in people who are malnourished, even though maybe they're eating enough food. So I think the first thing is just like, are you eating enough food point blank? Like, are you actually fueling your body, but not just calorie wise? Like, are you eating enough nutrients? Are you eating just a highly processed, if it fits your macros diet versus are you eating whole foods like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, animal proteins? Are you sleeping enough? That's a really big one.
Yeah, that's probably like one of my top two.
Because most people are not sleeping. Like most people are, we live in a culture where it's literally like hustle culture, have your day job and then have your side gig, you know?
Wake up at 5 a.m., do this.
Right? Yeah, like no matter what, like we're just gonna get so much work done and so we just don't sleep. So I see a lot of my clients sleeping like 4 hours a night telling me they feel great, you know, and then it's like, okay, well, we could throw every supplement at the world at you, but you're not sleeping. Your body's not getting its primary source of recovery, you know?
And then one of the next ones is probably stress. That's probably the one of the highest, I'd say. One of the top issues that we run into is like people think that they're not stressed or they're not perceiving the stress, but their
or they've been so stressed for so long they don't even realize they're stressed anymore.
I hear her talking to her clients probably every week. It's like, are you stressed? And they're like, no. I'm like, are you really stressed?
But then they have insomnia, you know, they can't sleep. So
like, my mind's wandering. Oh yeah, stressed. Okay, so that's probably a big issue, and that's going to disrupt a lot of other things. So managing the stress and like not getting rid of it, but just at least managing their perception of it or minimizing it or increasing their resilience. So.
Yeah, having like those tools to manage it. And then exercise is another big one. And we see that with people who are not exercising enough. Like they're just not moving their bodies. They're going to the gym and they're just like not moving the rest of the day. Or people that are over exercising, which is a lot more of the population.
Yeah, a lot of the people that come in are at the point where like they're so neurotic that they're walking all day.
All day, yeah. As a stress management tool. But it's like we're just trading one stress for another.
Yeah, so there's a lot we can kind of like unpack there into some more. So okay, yeah. I mean, those are all probably the big main points. So like, let's unpack those into some smaller, digestible sections because there's a few things. One is, I love what you said about the sleep thing because everyone talks about it, but I don't think that most people actually know what it feels like or what it's supposed to look like. Okay. So I know for me personally, I'm extremely busy, but sleep is non-negotiable. I'm going to get a minimum amount no matter what. That is, and the way that that's accomplished is it's scheduled. Like the thing is, like, in order to do things, if you're a busy person, whether that means you're like a parent with kids' activities or whether you're a business owner or whatever it is, you have to schedule things. Like it has to be a part of your routine. It has to be a part of your schedule. You can't just like want something to happen and then all of a sudden we get to, you know, midnight and like, all right, well, we're still going, right? Like there has to be a routine and there has to be a schedule. And so as coaches, something that we're doing, and a lot of people don't know this because really they think we're paying them to set up some kind of plan, but really what they're paying us for is we're organizers. We're like organizing all these things because there's a lot of information out there now. There's a lot of good information, a lot of bad information, but we are really here to kind of like make all this into a digestible routine that someone can implement. So like one of the things that I do with sleep is, of course, I talk about it, but on all the initial instructions I send out is like I actually give suggestions in terms of like, here's what a regular length of a day could look like. Here's when, in an ideal world, it would be great if you could go to bed between, 9 and midnight every day, like keep these things consistent, wake up between this and this time, like make this into a routine, because if it's not a routine, then it's really easy for the day to get away from you. It's really easy to get caught up in things. It's just like nutrition. If you don't have a regimen and routine, I notice this with people that track macros a lot. Like if you want to track macros and go that route, that's great. But I don't know a lot of people outside of really seasoned people that can just track as the day goes on and not be totally screwed by 9 p.m. at night. Like, oh shit, like all this stuff, right? What do I do?
I have 75 grams of protein and nothing else left.
Yeah, it's like, what do I do? So just like anything else, it has to be something that you plan that you plan for, right? And then of course there's so many easy things. I think people get caught up in all the nuanced stuff in terms of like, I can do all these things for my parasympathetic nervous system and journal and meditation and do all this stuff. And hey, listen, if it works, that's great. I encourage it. But in order to sleep, you have to be tired. So like, you can't just jump in bed at 10 o'clock and think that you're going to go to sleep if you're stimulated,
Yeah.
right? So really, really, really easy stuff people could do is even 30 minutes before you go to bed. It could be more, but even like a minimum of 30 minutes before you go to bed. Do something that's not stimulating, throw your blue light blockers on, chill out, do something that's not, don't watch like John Wick 4 at like, at what, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, because then you're going to be tired. Like if you try sitting, like I tell people this, I'm like, try sitting in a dark room with your blue light blockers on and like some real light music on for 30 minutes and just chill. One of two things is going to happen. One, you're going to have a panic attack because you have an anxiety problem. That's a separate conversation.
Yeah.
Or two, you're going to get tired.
Yeah.
You're going to be tired. I know me personally, my body's so it's like so regimented because circadian rhythm is so strong and so real that I could be doing something on the weekend, but it's like 10 o'clock and I'm like,
I need to go to bed.
oh shit.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's 10 o'clock. I look like it's 10 o'clock.
That's like a big thing too, though. I see with especially like newer people that I'm working with is they're waking up super early throughout the week, but then on the weekends they're staying up super late and they're sleeping super late, and their circadian rhythm is they don't really have one, it's like all over the place. And then they wonder why during the week they feel like shit, or like on Monday mornings they can't wake up. Well, Sunday night you couldn't fall asleep because you slept till noon on Sunday. So that's another big one, is I encourage people to try to keep at least somewhat of the same schedule. Like if you wake up at 4 a.m. to train before work Monday through Friday, you don't have to wake up at 4 a.m., but maybe we wake up at 6,
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with that. And I think that like personally, even if there's like the rare occasion where on a Friday night or Saturday something comes up and you're out a little later doing something, I'm not going to sleep till 11 the next day because I'm done. Like it's going to take me 3 days to get back into the rhythm again. I'm going to eat that extra like hour that I lost of sleep, but I'll be fine from there.
Yeah, like I normally wake up at 6, and if we all do that. We all have nights where we go out and we do stuff, but I'm waking up at 8. Like that to me, I slept in, but I'm still going to be able to fall asleep around 10 or 11. You know.
Yep, absolutely. So I love all those suggestions, and the stress. And John, you had said something about the stress perception and I think the thing that's really important there is stress elimination is probably a pipe dream. Good luck with that. I don't know what
you shouldn't eliminate all your stress.
Yeah, and I find people will try to eliminate all of their stressors and then stress themselves out trying to eliminate all of the stressors.
Yeah.
Like I've literally had clients ask me, how can I get rid of all of my stress? I'm like, you cannot, and you're going to stress yourself out so much trying to do that. It's how do we perceive that stress, and how do we set ourselves up to be successful through that stress?
Yep. And you also, and it really all that comes down to is building awareness. Like, we've talked about this before in different conversations, and it's that first step is you have to be aware that you're stressed, right? You got to, those people, and that's why like lab work and things in whether it's hormones or cortisol levels or Dutch testing or whatever, those tools are useful. Like we use those things as coaches just as much for buy-in purposes as we do for actual data purposes, because if I can show a client, like you see all these red marks on here, this is bad, right? This is not supposed to be there. So we can leverage that to, and I get it. People don't know. And I try not to get upset about it or anything, because I understand that they just don't know and they've been living in a certain zone. But I literally talked about this on my last call. I think it was a couple hours ago. And one of the things I do with people is like, I'll ask them questions sometimes, because sometimes I like them to like repeat something back to me. right? Because when they repeat something back to me, if it comes out of their mouth versus me telling them something versus it being their idea
Yeah.
is two different things. So if client comes in on Monday, they're like, Coach, I'm up 2 pounds. They're pissed off, they're bloated, like whatever's happening, but they named 5 things within that update that caused it. Like the answers it's all in there. I was like, did you think perhaps that XYZ was a reason? Oh,
Maybe.
okay. It's like, yeah. I was like, yeah, it's there. I said, so don't get bent out of shape about it. Just understand what it is. So next time you can process it a little bit better. Right.
Yeah. I think that's where like the education component is so important too. Like I know we're all coaches that we like to explain things to our clients. We don't like to just tell them what to do. And I think that's where it really comes in handy, because if you can teach someone how to understand their own biofeedback, why is this scale up? Why am I watery? Why was I constipated this week? Or like my poop was pebbly this week. Oh, well, maybe it's because, I had that big work meeting this week that I was really nervous about. Or maybe it's because, I trained really hard in the gym. So my body's like, inflamed and stressed out in that capacity. I think that a lot of times really helps, like explaining to them how stress. I just had a client, we did like a team call last week on stress. And I had a client who checked in today and she was talking about how she recognized, we explained how stress affects the body, and she recognized the symptoms of stress. And she was able to almost like backtrack to like, oh, I see how these things were actually stressing me out, even though I was kind of telling myself they weren't stressing me out, but I was seeing the symptoms. So now I realized that they were stressors. So I think that's kind of a cool thing for people to be able to start like understanding the things their body's telling them so they can see the truth,
Yeah. And you see it in updates. So an easy way to kind of decipher it in an update, maybe there's some coaches listening that are like, oh, I don't know how to like navigate this with people, is the over reporters, the people that give you 14 paragraphs in the update, but only like 2 sentences have substance.
Yeah.
There's what you'll notice over time is as they build that better stress perception and awareness, the updates get more they get smaller, but they get better.
Yeah.
They're more concise, right? They know like, okay, this is probably not relevant, this is relevant, et cetera, et cetera. But that takes some help from us as the coaches to work through that stuff. And this is anyone. This is competitive bodybuilders all the way down to, Gen Pop moms coming in for weight loss, because there's plenty of bodybuilders that are just as bad, insanely neurotic, and there's all kinds of habits that we have to try to break. So that's a really cool thing that I notice with people, is that as that starts to happen, you can actually just see it. You can see it happening, because if you're getting anxiety reading the update as a coach, you can only imagine and that's like a glimpse in time. It took them 3 to 5 minutes to report to you. Could you imagine what the other 1,000 minutes a week is like? What's going on there?
Yeah.
So.
And that's definitely something I see with like my clients that are struggling with their hormones, especially when it's more of like the amenorrhea cases, low progesterone, even like an estrogen dominance. I usually see a lot of them being like the over reporters as well. And that's something that I have to work on with them a lot, is like, hey, your hormones, we're working on healing your hormones, but as long as you're stressed out about your hormones, because a lot of times they're so nervous that their hormones are never going to come back on, they're never going to get that period again, they start to overanalyze everything and worry about everything. That a lot of times can be the reason why things aren't coming back on. So I think just teaching them like, hey, these are all the stressors, this is what we can do about it, so they feel in control again, can really help them to decrease some of the stress, at least, because a lot of times they're still worried that period's not going to come back, so at least we can decrease some of it. And then we can work on like, hey, you have to believe, you have to have faith in your body. You've seen your body be able to overcome all of these other things. This is just going to be one more of those.
Yep. I call it, it's like identifying. It's like identifying I said this in a group call the other day. I use the name SIBO Sally, and it's SIBO Sally. She's like, I'm always going to be SIBO Sally.
Yeah.
But if that's your mindset, then yeah, I mean, that's probably what you're always going to be. It's almost in a way, it's a victim mentality to an extent. in a way. You know, it's that you're really identifying with something, and as long as you continue to be that person in your mind, you're always going to struggle getting over that hump fully. No matter how good we're doing as coaches and what protocols we're giving people, it's difficult. And that goes for anything. I would say anyone that's probably struggled with like mental illness, anything like that, they could probably relate to that, you know?
Yeah.
So that's tough. But
I see that all the time with like women that are trying to get pregnant. They're so stressed out about, wanting to get pregnant. They can't get pregnant. As soon as they give up the dream, they get pregnant because we finally release that stress. You finally are just like, okay, I'm going to stop trying to control this so much and just let it be. And then boom, it happens. And I feel like the same honestly happens a lot of times when it comes to our hormones. It's like, once you finally just accept, like, it's going to happen when it happens, that's when it happens.
yeah. And this isn't necessarily hormone protocol related, but on that topic, and we could kind of switch gears, is I say the same thing to a lot of my competitor clients, because again, they also get very more so leaning towards like the neuroticism side of things, right? But like I've had a lot of my competitor clients try to explore different things in the off season and different hobbies and stuff that they enjoy, and kind of like diversify themselves a little bit in a sense. And they always get better results, because what they realize is like, oh, I know how to follow a plan, and the plan's still going to be there, even though I'm not thinking about it right now. Like I'm still, it's a weird concept. Like, as if the plan isn't going to work if I'm not dwelling on it all the time. Like, nah, you're still doing it. You don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you don't have to constantly think about the steps. That's what we're here for. Like you pay us to implement the steps. The only real thought that you have to put into it is put the food on the scale or report the check-in or do the stuff, but like otherwise live your life. You know what I mean? You don't have to sit and think about it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, that's something. So like I said, I work with a lot of women who come from histories of like under eating, over exercise, and maybe even being underweight when they come to work with me. And, a lot of times the primary goal is I want to get my period back, but I don't want to get super fat. I don't want to hate my body, And I always tell them, like, as a coach, it does not look good on me to just make all of my clients fat. Like, could you imagine that, like, every single person that comes to work with me just ends up looking awful? They get their period back, but they look terrible. That nobody would ever hire me. So I always like tell them, like, it's not good for business for that to be the outcome. So just release some of that stress, because I'm here for you. I want to get you the results that you want. Like, we share the same goal,
I love that. And I think that's something I've literally said to people with just about any goal is, do you really think that I would intentionally do something that was going to make you worse?
Yeah, exactly.
What kind of business model would that be?
Yeah, I love
like, why would I?
No results.
Right. Why would I intentionally give you worse results? That doesn't make any sense, does it? Yeah.
But I think that's the benefit of having a coach. Like, realistically, that's the benefit of having a coach. You don't have to go on Google anymore. You don't have to try a million different things anymore. You can just trust the plan and go enjoy your life, because you just release so much stress that you don't have to have there anymore.
Yeah, get off the internet.
Yes, please.
Yeah, get off. So there's one that I wanted to touch on at least a little bit, which was the birth control piece, because this is not like something we have to go super in depth about, but I think there is one big mistake that I see a lot, and that the use of the birth control and different types and things depending on the type is probably one of the things that's driving some of the issues that the person's having, right? So we know that. So, and they might also know that. So sometimes they're like, I want to come off of this, right? Great thought. Makes sense. I get it. Perfect. I'm on board with that. However, when we think about recovering hormones, it's the kind of the same concept with coming off birth control. There's going to be some lag period to bring that hormone signaling and everything back up, to get the hormones back up, to induce the ovulation, to induce the period, etc. So would we want to do that if we still have all this other stuff that's super broken. Because if we're under eating, if we're like severely under eating, over exercising, not supporting all the stress things that we talked about, and we just yank this thing out, we're probably not in a very good position to recover.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, you need a well-functioning body. You need a well-functioning liver. You need a well-functioning digestive system. You need to not be overly stressed, because we're just throwing another stressor into the system. And I feel like that's where we run into all the issues. People are so afraid to come off of birth control. And if you're in a healthy place, I feel like coming off of birth control is really not as complex as it seems. But it's just that so many people are in really unhealthy places, or maybe they went on birth control due to having really awful periods, or really like there was something wrong with the hormones that was never looked into, it was never addressed. They were just slapped on birth control to solve the problem, and then they just come off of it, and then we see kind of like the rebound there. But I feel like, again, if they're in a healthy place, you're going to be in a better spot to address whatever that may have been,
right?
You know,
at least as healthy as we can make it,
yeah,
considering this, considering the circumstances. But but yeah, I see that a lot. They maybe prematurely stop, right? Because that, whatever that birth control environment is, that it's not homeostasis in the sense that it's not normal function, but it is their homeostasis at that time. And in order for us to disrupt that, we really have to have everything else in line and ready to go, so that's going to be super important. So another thing that we should definitely touch on too is, because these things obviously coincide heavily, is the GI portion.
Yeah.
I would venture to say the vast majority of cases that have some type of hormone dysfunction probably have a GI issue to some extent.
Yeah.
So I think where people get kind of caught up in this, even a lot of the coaches, is like, what sequence do we kind of want to address things in? Which one of these things is maybe more important to address? Do we just do all of it at once? Is it kind of, how do we navigate those situations? It's like the chicken or the eggs, scenario. It's like, which is causing which? And it's like anything, coming off birth control, trying to restore hormone function, starting HRT, like anytime that we're going to be trying to bring hormone levels up, especially bringing up progesterone, bringing up testosterone, maybe trying to normalize estrogen. We want to make sure that the body is going to detoxify and metabolize the hormones properly. Mm-hmm. So if we ignore the systems which we detoxify and metabolize hormones, which is the liver and GI tract primarily, then we may have some success. We may have some success like bringing the levels up, but what we're actually doing with the hormones internally is not going to be optimal, right?
Yeah, I like to do a lot of because there's a lot of basics that people are not tackling when it comes to GI. So I feel like you don't always have to go straight to we have potentially a bacterial overgrowth. Let's throw a bunch of antimicrobial herbs at this person. It could just be that their diet sucks. It could be that they're having way too much fiber or not enough fiber, that they're really stressed, they're not sleeping, like all of those things. I find more often than not, just looking at people's diet and changing their diet makes a huge difference when it comes to their gut. And then you can support their liver, support bringing stress down, and work on the GI side of things before you have to go hard in it. But I will say, for me, because I've had a lot of hormonal issues, I was doing everything right when it came to healing my hormones. And it wasn't until I finally addressed my gut and actually ran a SIBO protocol and got rid of the SIBO that things started to really kick back in. So I feel like it's very person to person dependent. But I was already doing everything right. My body was in as healthy of a place as it could possibly be before I threw all of those herbs into the mix. Or I didn't do antibiotics, but antibiotics could be an option too. So I wasn't going to have this huge negative reaction to it. But once I got my gut into a good place, then suddenly my periods became a lot less aggressive and things started to balance out a lot more for me. So, I can definitely say, for me, had I not tackled the gut, I don't know if my hormones would have gotten where I wanted them to be.
Yeah, and I deal with I do with a lot of male functional cases too, which I know is not everyone's thing. Like a lot of female cases, but I would say probably at least 50% of my functional health cases are men. So I get a lot of them. So people hear functional health and hormones and they just kind of automatically think women.
Yeah.
And I mean, the guys have their own share of, issues as well, whether it's low testosterone or GI issues are super prevalent in men as well. So I'm dealing with a lot of adrenal issues in men, like all those things. The only thing that really differs in men, of course, is they don't have a menstrual cycle. So there's not this menstrual flow and ebbs and flows of hormones that a female's dealing with. It's more of a static thing. So, but it's the same, it's exactly the same kind of situation in men as like and I see it even in the like realm with bodybuilders and people using performance enhancements and all these things, is that they do the same stuff. They have an estrogen issue, so they take an aromatase inhibitor. I'm like, nah, well, you've had SIBO for 4 years, and so you're not metabolizing your estrogen. So there's a lot of carryover in really all populations when it comes to GI health. I would say personally, I probably lean towards focusing more heavily on that side of things first in most people, just for the simple fact that it's one of the more obvious things that jump out to me. It's going to influence detoxification, metabolism of hormones. It is, it's also something where if I'm limited on budget, like testing with people, I would almost, and I could see obvious GI issues, like I would almost rather spend the money on doing a GI map and fix that stuff before spending the money on a Dutch test and working on those things, because the stress and hormones are going to, stress is something that we can test for. It's very helpful to test for it, but we can see it without testing. So we can we could, if we had to, save budget on that if we need to.
And
right?
if someone has a really bad overgrowth, you can infer that they probably have some pretty big stress and inflammation in the system, right? Just due to the infection.
Right. So we know that it's there. And also the same thing with the hormones, like you said, with your cycles, we're probably not going to normalize it until we fix the systems that are going to help us handle the hormones. Right. So that's, if people are like struggling to navigate those situations, and I know a lot of people that are newer in the functional space, they kind of fall into that trap of implementing 6 different protocols for every issue that they see. That might be something to consider in terms of like how you're sequencing things, and it's expensive. I mean, people aren't coming in assuming that they're going to spend $1,200 on just testing alone. Like that's probably not really they didn't account for that a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So, we have to be able to kind of like prioritize things and help them there.
Yeah. And that's where sometimes, like, if I can get a client to get in with a doctor and have a doctor run like a SIBO breath test, I'll try to do that too. I try to let them use their insurance as much as possible. Obviously, we know that's not always a feasible option and they can't get the testing run. And obviously there could be so much more going on than just SIBO, right? Like it could be a whole slew of things. But I'm like, okay, well, if you really don't have the money to spend, like that's even with, I prefer to stay away from having to jump to protocols if we don't have to, let's go ahead and just get this testing done by the doctor first, see if we can find anything out before we move forward.
Absolutely. So one other thing I wanted to touch on too is with this is more like more on the mindset side of things, because one of the things that I'm looking at it with protocols is, of course, once we kind of correct the stress, I mean, we're normally pretty set for most people, but I think that an issue that I see is people reverting back to old habits and old mindset as soon as whatever said protocol is done.
Yeah.
Right. So something that we really have to be careful of is we have to really make sure that they are I don't know how I want to exactly word this. We got to really make sure that they're able to be consistent with those mindset shifts and really like at peace with the process before we kind of tackle those things, because I don't want to, for example, put someone through a SIBO protocol and of course then revert right back to whatever caused the SIBO protocol.
Usually drinking is a big thing.
Drinking.
Yeah. We had a bunch of people that were like, when are we going to do? I got to plan out my protocol. So then I got a vacation here so I can drink. I can't have it then. So I'm going to push it off. And like
we can't be drinking that much alcohol right after a gut protocol. You're not in a very good place to do that.
Right. So sometimes there are discussions about psychologically, we know that there has to be some shifts, but sometimes there are like some lifestyle changes that it's a serious conversation. Like this has to permanently be different.
Yeah.
This just has to be a thing now. If you want this to work and you want this to stick, you can't be going out on the weekends and getting, sloshed every weekend. Like you're going to end up right back where you're at.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's a big reason why I like to have like prerequisites before we do a protocol, because we need to get those foundational things down. Because honestly, someone might add in all of these supplements, go on this protocol. They're keeping a whole lot of things exactly the same, but now they're taking these supplements and they're making them feel better. And it's like almost allowing them to get away with continuing to do the things that got them there in the first place. So there's not that like mental click of I have to change these things. So I like to see that consistency in lifestyle change first, before we go and just waste our money on supplements that are going to, maybe make you feel better for 12 weeks, but then what?
I say you see this a lot in competitors too. Like when they're in prep, they're on prep, they're in prep and they're nailing everything. But if they don't have that show, that's when you see all the different variables come out. So it's just that mindset. And like, regardless of if they're coming into us for a gut protocol or hormone protocol, whatever, we need to set those foundations. Like we tell people, this is a lifestyle change. We don't sell a program. We don't, like everyone's saying, right, oh, do my week program. We don't sell a program for a reason, because it's not a program. It's something that you build off of, and it's a lifestyle change. And that's why a lot of our clients have been with us for a year plus.
Yeah. I mean, people, I'm sure all three of us have gone through some like version of this, but you kind of have to evolve into a different version of yourself. I mean, if you can't just skate by and expect to be the same exact version of yourself that got you where you're at in the first place. That is difficult. That's really difficult, because it goes back to what I had said about kind of like identifying with this. People also identify with a lot of those habitual things in their routine, because there's so many environmental factors that make that tough. Maybe their friends or their family are part of that equation. It's like that's the environment that they're in. Maybe like the people they were used to hanging out with all the time
when I was in the Army, that's like a big cultural thing. Like you're gonna have beers with the guys on the weekends. You're gonna do all this. You're gonna like sleep 5 hours.
It's like if you're excluded if you don't do
yeah. It's a little bit like you're leaving people behind, and you don't want them to think that, oh, you think you're better than them. It's like, no, it's just, hey, this is what I need to do for me. It's like just a slight lifestyle change. So you're not leaving your friends behind. You just can't do all those things that you were doing before.
And we talk a lot with our clients about like how to set boundaries and how to have those conversations with your family, because I think people fall so into that all or nothing. Like you don't have to stop hanging out with your friends. You don't have to like not go to family events. It's just communicating with people what you're doing, why you're doing it, why it matters to you, so that they can support you. And like I always tell people, like literally, if the people in your life don't support you wanting to feel decent because you feel like garbage all the time, do you really need those people in your life? I know that's really tough. No one wants to cut people
harsh, but it's true.
It's a wake-up call that people kind of suck.
No, it is, and I will say that I have friends, like people that I'm friends with locally. A couple of them are more in this lifestyle. A couple of them really aren't. But I've been doing this long enough and they respect me enough that we don't really have conversations about any of that. Like it's not like I'm not weird if I do something that they're not or that they're not doing or vice versa. It's not a problem, you know.
But also,
And
also the clients have to realize that they can't hang out with these people and then act like what they're doing now is the most miserable thing in the world. Because these
like
people
bitch about it 24/7.
these people are your friends. So if you're bitching about it, they're not gonna want you to do it because it sucks.
Yeah.
right.
Like if you're going out drinking and you're like, oh, this really sucks.
Oh, I wish I
drink.
could drink.
Then your friends won't be supportive because they're like, you're miserable. Why would I support you in your misery? You know?
Right.
But if you're genuinely caring about it and you're not making a big deal about it too, I think that's another big one. People like in prep, don't go out to dinner with your friends in prep and whine and complain about how hungry you are the entire time. Sit there and enjoy the time with your friends if you want to go be with them, and just accept the fact that you chose to be in prep, you know, or accept the fact that you're healing your gut or you're working on healing your hormones, you're trying to get your period back, like whatever it may be. It doesn't have to be a big deal. Once you're making it a big deal, it's becoming a big deal.
And if you and your friends' personalities are that bad that you can't have a conversation without being intoxicated, then they're, you know, you guys might not be as compatible as you think.
You don't actually like them.
Yeah, I mean, and I know that's kind of getting off into like a side tangent, but I mean, that is a very real concern in this space, because especially with people that are newer to competing and they're having to kind of like learn how to integrate themselves into, you know, these people's lives, or people that are not competitors in their general population. They legitimately want to make a change to their life and to their habits and their routine. That's a real obstacle. It's a really big and difficult obstacle, and you find that sometimes people have to get left behind. Sometimes there are hard conversations that you have to have with people. But what I've found personally is that if you are genuinely around good people that care about you, you probably will be fine, and you're probably going to be supported. And you might even find that your friends and people that are around you will kind of adopt some of these things themselves, and they may even do better for themselves and be encouraged by it and encourage you. But if you are in this very toxic, like if your environment is very toxic, and that's and these drinking and partying and these like types of like these social norms are the only thing that you really had, then I think that some people are going to have to go through this period where they're kind of let down a little bit. So like, man, maybe my circle wasn't quite what I thought it was. And that's tough. But a lot of people do just feed off of that toxicity, you know? It's the same thing in relationships with boyfriends, girlfriends, husbands, and wives. Man, I hate to say this, and I knock on wood, I haven't had this happen in a while, but I've had clients in the past where they've had relationships dissolve, you know, because, and wasn't an intentional thing. It was just like and of course I didn't really know about it until later on. It wasn't something we had a conversation about. It was just a simple fact that they really were not being supported, and they really weren't able to be a better version of themselves, and they were just tired of being miserable, and their partner wasn't really on board with living a better life with them. Right. And that's really tough. But like, this is a person that you're basically probably going to see every single day of your life. You're going to get up with them, go to bed with them, you know, and unfortunately, like, people have to, you know, you have to evolve sometimes. It's tough.
Yeah, I mean, even speaking to the relationships and hormones, though, I mean, I'm sure you've seen this before, but where people get out of relationships and suddenly all of this work that you've been doing starts to seem to work. It's like nothing seemed to work before. You couldn't get the period back. They were constipated and bloated all the time, and now they're not in this relationship. And suddenly maybe there's still some residual issues, but it's like we're finally moving in the right direction. It's like the stress that you didn't realize was there is finally lifted off of you, you know, because you had this pressure to be something that you weren't, you know?
Yeah. It took me a while to accept those things in my own life, but I got to a point where at any given point I'm no longer afraid to voice my opinion when it comes to that stuff. If people that want to be a part of my life, like I am 100% supportive. I have no problem bending over backwards for the people that are important to me, but I'm also at the same token to be like, listen, this isn't, I don't want any part of this. I'm sorry, no offense, but like, this isn't what I'm about. And I'm not going to, go against what I want to do to become a better person just to appease you.
Yeah. It's like the most cliche thing in the world in the social media land, but like, know your why. But like, truly, know why you're doing what you're doing. Know why you're making the changes, why you're putting in the work, why you're working on these things, because then you're not as easily swayed. If you're just doing it because you think it's the thing to do and it doesn't really matter to you, that's where you're more easily swayed by people.
Yeah. And we can kind of close it out with this. I think that this is, whether it's the relationships or the mindset or the prerequisites, it's like, where do you want to be in 5 years, 2 years, 4 years, 10 years, whatever? Like, where do you want to do this again? Do you want to keep doing these protocols? Do you want to keep, do you want to keep losing weight and regaining weight? Do you want to keep having to deal with all these toxic relationships? Like, where do you want to be at? Like, you have to take some steps here that are going to potentially be uncomfortable if you want to attain success. And
keep it. Yeah.
And I think that knowing where you want to be is going to help those like fears not be so scary, because where you want to be matters so much more than the potential fears of things happening. And it's so much scarier to imagine being in the exact same spot that you're in today because you didn't do those things that were uncomfortable and scary. It's like, which is scary.
Yeah. An example I use a lot of the time is the wedding body. Okay. So I use this example a lot, the wedding body. It's like, I want to lose, this is what I want to look like for my wedding. I want to lose 15 pounds for my wedding. I'm like, no, this is the body that you want all the time.
Yeah.
It's not the body, like, you don't want to gain it back after your wedding. This is what you're telling me is like, this is what you want as a permanent thing, right? Of course. I mean, so my question is like, are we going to focus on this one goal? Like, hey, I would love to be able to help you look better in that dress for your wedding. That's cool. Nothing wrong with that. But ultimately, like, what you're telling me is this is probably the body that you want to live with indefinitely. So like, let's take steps towards that. Right.
Yeah.
So,
and that dictates the way you get there versus like just driving yourself into the ground to get there. Let's take an approach that changes your lifestyle and allows you to get there maybe a little bit slower, but in a way that you're going to maintain that forever. Yep.
Because it doesn't get any easier over time. It's only gonna get tougher. I am not, and none of us are in a higher age bracket, but we definitely work with people that probably are definitely older than us. So it's, you can see those patterns of years and decades of like residual damage there. And it's not going to get better in another 10 years. Trust me.
Yeah. It's such a big motivator though, to like work on those things now so that you don't find yourself in your 50s as that person who can't lose weight, who like hates their body and has just accepted it as your reality for the rest of forever. Like, don't build up all of that damage and puts your body through so much on the way there. Like, just take care of it now and your life will be easy forever. Easier.
Yeah. Easier.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you can see a 60-year-old that people are like, damn, you're 60.
Yeah. Must be nice.
Yeah. I want to be that. I mean, I don't want to be like 240 pounds when I'm 60. Yeah. I'm done with that shit. Yeah. But probably way before then. But I would definitely like to be that guy that you're talking about,
Well, watching the CrossFit Games this weekend, they got the Masters guys, and they're like 60 years old, clean and jerking like 200 pounds. I'm like, whoa.
That's John's like post-bodybuilding plan.
Post-bodybuilding plan, more functional stuff.
That's funny. Cool, guys. Well, I appreciate you both coming on here. I will reshare this and tag you guys in it as well.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much.
I appreciate you guys. I'll talk to you again soon.
Bye.